file writing and reading, right? So let me go through the project rubrics again. If you have any question today. So the project is due tomorrow officially, but unofficially you can submit it until Sunday midnight. Okay. These are the rubrics. So first thing is like write the output to the file, not the terminal this time. And the output should be formatted correctly with 3 decimal places for each population data. That can work with any valid parameter inputs. So right now we are getting the inputs through the command line parameter, right? And there are like 4 inputs. You need to validate those input parameter. You can use either a for loop or while loop, it doesn't matter, but make sure you use the if statement and user-defined function. As I told you that for the logistic equation, you need to write a function for that particular logistic equation, at least one, and also the main function. And depending on the scenario or your design, you can write as many functions as you want. Those are the user-defined function. But the bottom line of the function is like, do not write and like, do not print anything inside a function, right? So the function can take inputs or input or inputs, and it will produce some output or outputs. For the logistic equation, what are the inputs? The previous population and the growth rate, it will generate the next population, right? And do not print anything inside that function unless it's the main function. So the main function's job is to get the input, call different user-defined function to process it, and finally print it. But in this particular project, you don't need to print to the terminal. You need to print or you need to write those information to the file by giving the file name through the input. Make sure the file name is this particular name. It should contain a main function with conditional execution, that what you have already done before. The logistic equation is implemented in its own function, correctly parse the command line parameter and validates the inputs. You know how to validate the input. So there are like at least 3 inputs you need to validate: the initial population, growth rate, and the simulation steps, right? For the growth rate, for the initial population, it should be in between 0 to 1. 0 and 1 are not valid numbers. It should be in between 0 to 1. Same thing for the growth rate. It should be in between 0 to 4. Again, 0 and 4 are not the valid number. Those are the upper bound and lower bound of the range. And then third one is the simulation steps. It should be positive number. So 0 is not a valid number. 0 is not a positive integer. It should be at least a positive integer. So you need to validate those things through the try and accept or conditionals, and make sure the simulation steps is not a float number. It's a integer number, right? If you put a float number inside a for loop or while loop, you'll have some errors. So do not do that. Make sure you validate those things before passing those information to the for loop or while loop. You need to use the list to capture all population values over time that I have told you in the last week, that do not use the file right now till last week. You can store those information in a list. And I told you in the last class, you can write to the file from a list using the what function? What function you can use to print a list to the file?
Write function.
Write function?
The write lines.
Write lines function. Write will print the string only, and write lines will print a list of strings. So you can create a list of strings and pass that list to the write lines functions so that it will print automatically. You need to validate the values within the acceptable range that I told you previously. And you need to follow the proper coding style, either snake case or camel case. Make sure the variable naming and meaning. These are the 4 command line argument. You could either use system.argv or argparse, depending on your understandable level. I think system.argv is easy to grasp, but argparse is more like a professional things. If you can use the argparse, that would be great. But in other way, if you're using system.argv, you need to validate those inputs manually. In the argparse, it will validate automatically. For example, if you write the type is float, it will check whether it's a float value or an integer value or a string value. Or if it's not a float value, it will raise an error, like a type int. Function to compute the next population value, that is the logistic equation. You need to use a list to store the each step's population, validate the inputs, and output should be in a particular format. If the simulation step is, for example, 10, you have to start from 0. 0 is the initial population. From 0 up to 10, not 9. That means you have simulation step plus 1 iteration here. And what is the format? The format is first the simulation number, then a tab line, then the population growth at that particular time with 3 decimal places. So if it is like 0.01, you have to put 0.0100. Okay. And you need to use the main function to get the input, to call the user-defined function and print it to the files, and make sure you use this conditional block to call the main function. And as I told you, do not use any global code unless import. Import is not import cannot be treated as a global code in this class. And what is a global code?
Something outside of a function.
Something outside of a function, something outside of a block. It should be inside a block. For example, if you're calling main function, it should be inside this conditional block. That's why it is not a global code. Make sense? Any question? So today is the very last day before the project due. Are you confident to finish the project by tomorrow? Or maybe through the weekend?
Yeah.
Okay. Let me know if you have any question before now and tomorrow, not during the weekend. I plan to go ski during the weekend. Are you going to go to the ski this weekend? Anyone? No? A lot of snow here. Yeah, it's like 4 feet of snow in Alda. 48 inch, so too much. They closed the resort yesterday. Okay, so these are the required tasks. You need to use conditionals, loops, either for or while loop. This time you can use either one, either for or while, not both. Use a defined function to organize your code, main function, input validation, snake case, camel case, list to capture the sequences. You need to capture the input from command line parameter using sys.argv or argparse. And finally, you need to print the data not to the terminal. You need to write those data to the file. I already have told you last day how you can write to the file. Okay. Okay, so yesterday, like last class, I talked about the file basics. So there are 2 types of path, relative versus absolute. Depending on the scenario, you'll use relative or absolute. But if you're using your own computer, it's better to use an absolute path. But if it is like a web server, sometimes the absolute path is really too long. In that particular case, you can use the relative path. And why do you need to use a file system? Well, sometimes you need to store the information in a secondary memory. Otherwise, it will wipe when we close the program in RAM. So we need to use the open function. Open is a built-in Python function. Through the open function, we can open a file in a different mode. It could be either read, write, or append. Write or append similar. What's the difference? Kevin, what's the difference between write and append?
Write and append. The difference of append is it adds to the end, and write will write it.
Wipe the previous one. Yeah. So when you open the file in a write mode, it will wipe the previous data. But if it's like append, it will add whatever we have just after that count. Okay. Okay, so make sure you close the file when you open the file. This is really important because that can be used concurrently in different program. Right now you're using our own computer, but if it's like a web program, people can be using it from a different place. So if multiple person, multiple system are working with a file concurrently, make sure you open and close whenever you're done with working your file. And for the file reading, there are different functions: read, read line, and read lines. When you call the read function, it will give you the whole content. Read line will give you the first line. Read lines will give you the list of lines. And what's a seek method? Seek is actually a pointer. Initially starts from 0. By default, it's like 0. If you're not putting anything inside the parentheses, it's like 0. If you're putting something here, it will go to that particular point, then start from reading, like I start reading from there. For writing, you could either use the write and write lines. What's the difference between write and write lines, Cooper?
Write lines.
Oh, I always bring chocolates, so I forgot to bring the chocolate. Yeah. Beforehand, chocolate. So what's the difference between write and write lines?
I believe write lines erases the file and then starts over, correct?
No, so both function are writing to the file, but what's the main difference? You're writing to the file. In what context?
Oh, I see. Okay. Write is one thing, and
Yeah.
write lines is multiple.
Yeah. The write is like you're printing or writing just one string, and write lines like a list of strings. Okay. Okay. What if the file doesn't exist in case of reading a file? In case of reading a file, if the file doesn't exist, it'll create, right? Reading a file, it will not create, it will raise an error. It will raise a file not found error. But in case of writing, it will create. So there is another way to operate the file IO system. Like file IO means like input output, file reading and writing. This is like with open. If you use the with open, then you don't need to close it explicitly. It will close automatically whenever it is done. So with open is like a block. So you need to write the code inside the with open block. Whenever you're done with that block, question?
Is it like at the end of the block that it's just kind of hidden there?
Yes. So like I told you about the falling through, whenever it's the end of the block, it's closing and then going to the next line. This is how it works. So you don't need to remember every time to close the file. There's the best practice. Use the with open option. Copy and paste, I told you, you can write and read and write. So you can read from a file, write to the file. But one thing I missed is like print function. You can use a print function to write to the file. Let me see, what is the print function does? Print, is that here? Yeah. Oh no, I'm not going to print it. Control A, right? Search. Oh. Print. So print objects to the text stream file separated by separator and followed by end separator, end file, and flash. If present, must be given a keyword argument. You can see here, object, separator, end, file, flash. If you're not putting anything, just the object, it will just print to the terminal. If you put there like file to something, it will print that information to that file. So you need to specify like file is the file object, not the file name. You need to open the file with the file object. You need to put the file object here. The file is equal to the file object that I already created before. So for an example, like this one, if I'm going to print something, I'm going to print hello. File is equal to the in file. In file is the file object. This is the same as the write function. Okay, now we'll be working with CSV file. What is the CSV file? CSV is nothing but a text file, but they are comma separated vectors. We can write the information by comma separated information. And it can be treated as a table, just like our Excel file. So let me create a CSV file. Maybe in the desktop, I'm creating a CSV file. I can change the extension to CSV instead of TXT. Now it's a CSV file. So I'm going to open it with a notepad. There's nothing here. So what I'm going to do here, I'm just writing three information, for example, 1, 2, and 3. They are comma separated. And you can see here, in between the comma and 2, there is a space. That means this content is not exactly 2, it's like space 2. So make sure it is not just like our writing style. Whenever we write English, we're using like comma, then space, but not in the CSV file. So I'm saving it, save it, replace it. That's a read only. Okay. That's the problem we have created previously. Okay, that's the good thing. I'm not able to delete it right now. So test.csv. You can see the file name is test.csv.txt. So this is not a CSV file. It is a text file. So I told you about the hide extension thing here. If you just click hide extension, sometimes you're thinking, well, it's a CSV file. I put here like text.csv, but it is not. It is a text file. Even if there's a .csv. .csv is a file name, not the extension. The file name is text.csv and the extension is .txt. So I need to unhide this one and then remove the txt at the end. Now it's a CSV file, text.csv. Let me open it to the notepad. Write it here, 1, 2, 3. Save it. It allowed me to save. Now I'm going to open it in Microsoft Excel. It will create a table type of things. So whenever you're writing a comma separated file, it can be viewed as a table in Excel. So if I'm writing here like 4, 5, and 6, and saving it, I'm seeing here like it's in the next line is like 4, 5, 6. This is the simplest version of Excel file. Okay. Okay, now the question is, sometimes we need to read CSV file, and Python has already a module called like CSV. Well, with that module, you can easily read and write to the CSV file. But sometimes you need to know how you can operate a CSV file without the CSV module. That's what I told you before, like whenever you go for an interview, maybe they will ask you, well, can you open a CSV file? Well, I can easily do that. I know the CSV module, do not use the CSV module. Then, well, I don't know how to do that. That means you need to know different ways to operate or solve a problem with CSV module, without CSV module. With CSV module, it's like very easy. There are like few functions, you need to remember those few functions. But what happened about like if you don't know the regular file opening and the iterating, like a regular iteration of file system. Okay, let me go through the opening a CSV file without the CSV module. Is like the same as our TXT file open. So we can just write here, this is our CSV file for an example. I think I have something here. Let me see. What are the information here without CSV file? And you can see there, those are like a two-dimensional data, right? That what we have talked about previous week, two-dimensional list. So this is like two-dimensional data. One dimension is like student information. The other dimension is like each student, right? For the x-axis, it's like one particular information, one particular student information. And in total, it's like the whole information of the students. Okay. So now this is like a tabular things, how I can access this type of file. So for example, I am copying this information to the CSV file. For example, like CSV file name is like students.csv. How I can convert those information to a two-dimensional list? Well, in the two-dimensional list, it's like a list within a list, right? Now, how I can access those information and store those information in the two-dimensional list? Well, in the two-dimensional list, I told you, you need to break it into a one-dimensional list. Well, it's a one-dimensional list, for example. Each of the item is student information. Now, for each item, it's like a student information, then list within list. So what I can do here, I can just create a list of students. What are the students? Maybe Alice, Bob, and Charlie, Kara. These are the three students, right? It's like a one-dimensional list. Now, if I'm going to convert this one-dimensional list to a two-dimensional list, what I need to do, instead of Alice, I need to put Alice information. What are the information? Well, his name is Alice, then his grade is 20, age is 20, and major is like CS. So those are the information for Alice. Same thing for the Bob. I can write information for the Bob, I can write information for the Kara. Now it's a two-dimensional list, right? So given a CSV file like that, how I can generate a two-dimensional list? Well, I can iterate the CSV file just like our text file, line by line, starting with the first line. First line is the header. I don't need to worry about the first line. It's like a header. What's the second line? Second line is Alice information. So what I can do, I can create a list from the second line. I can create a list from third line. I can create a list from fourth line. That means I have like three lists. List from line 2, list from line 3, list from line 4. This is our individual list. Now, if I'm creating a top level list, students, for example, and this is like a list of Alice, this is like a list of Bob, and this is like a list of Kara. So what I can do here, these are three lists I can create from file read, and then this is my students list, a top level list. After creating the list, I can append that list to the main list. That means I'm appending here as an item. What's the item? Item is a list. Now, if you use here extend, what will happen? What will happen if you use the extend? So when you use the extend, it will just add, like extend the previous list and added those items to the list, right? Not just one item. It will create like Alice, 20, and CS, right? If you use the extend again, it will create Bob, 22, map. That means I cannot extract Alice and Bob's information from here if I use the extend. I can, but it's a different thing. I need to multiply by, well, if it's like a 0, then it's the Alice. If it is like 0 plus 3, it's like a Bob. Like I need to use a different technique. So you need to use an append so that it will have a list within a list. For Bob, it's another list within a list. This is what I've done here. I'm creating a table like 2-dimensional list and read the file. So line is like iterating. So I'm just removing if there are some spaces or other things at the end of this line. Maybe there's a new line here. So the strip function will remove the new lines. Then I know they're like comma separated things. I need to create a list. If I'm not separating, so this is like a string, a whole string, and it's separate by comma, by split. Otherwise, it's like only one string. It will create like this. But I would like to create a list from that string. That's why I use the split function by a comma separator so that I have the row. For one row, it's like a list. Then I can add those information to the list. Like this. Or something else. So from here, I have removed the new line, separated by comma, the row, and append that row to the table. So will that create this? What is the return type of the split function? String? A list of strings. So yeah, it's a list of strings.
But the 20 isn't a string.
20 is not the string. Now, if you're working with 20, maybe I ask you to find the average of their ages. You just pass that information to a function, you'll have an error. It's because 20 is not the integer number. It's a string. So make sure when you work with those things, after splitting, convert it to specified data structure. Make sense? Okay, so it will create like this. So since I haven't removed the first line, so the first line is the header, and the next onward are the information. And you already know that how we can access the 2-dimensional list. If you're in table 0, it is the first row, the header. Table 1 is the first, like second item, first index, the whole information. If I'm going to access only Alice, it will be like 1 and 0. So 1 is the first row, 0 is the first row. I'm sorry, 1 is the second row, and 0 is the second row, first column. Okay. Any question at this point? Okay. Well, if I would like to write to a CSV file, then make sure we need to use a comma there. So I have some information like a table. I have some information like a table. One, maybe not this one. Like this. have this information in a list, two-dimensional list. If I ask you, can you print those information to the file? Well, I can do that is because it's a list within a list. I can use the right lines. You can always print to the file, but not just like a CSV file format. CSV file format is like comma separated. So what you need to do, you need to put a string at a time with comma, where each of the items are separated by comma. But those items are in a list. You need to convert this list to a string. How we can convert a list to a string? Using the join function. How would like to join? We'd like to join by comma. So here I can join the row by comma, then I have a line. I'm just printing each line. Make sure there's a new line, otherwise it will print one after another. But make sure at the very end there will be no new line. Then there will be an extra line. You need to maintain this information for your project. I gave you some code in the last class how you can avoid the new line for the very last line. You can check how many the iterations we're going to do. When is the last iteration? Then you can just remove the last line, last new line. Okay. Okay, we need to use the two-dimensional list to store tabular data clearly, access rows and columns easily, modify the values before saving. We can use some performance analysis like count, search, filter, or we can do some statistics operation like mean, max, average, standard deviation, some other operations. So you need to know how you can, oh, well, there's an example here for the statistics analysis. For example, this is like a list. I would like to know what's the mean, max, average, median from this list, from this file. So this is like a CSV file, name, course name, and the score. Maybe I would like to know what's the minimum number from this course. Well, if you're using an Excel file, it is easier to sort from there. Mean, max, then average, I need to use their function. Same thing for median. But given that I don't have an Excel installed in my computer, I know programming. What I can do, I can just convert those things to a CSV file. And then I can extract those information, the score. And then since I have those numbers, I know how to find the mean, max, and median, average. Now there's some function like mean function. If you're running the mean function over a list, it will give you the list, the minimum value of a list. Same thing for the max. But for the average, there is no average function. You need to sum the numbers, the sum of the numbers. So there is a function called like sum. And then with the count, you can count how many items are there. The sum divided by count is the average. And what's the median? Well, this is not a statistics class. What's the median?
The number of times the specific number is found.
Maximum effect, like maximum frequency things, right? How do you know that? Well, given that you don't have a mean function, I'm going to find the minimum number. I'm giving you a list of numbers like 10, 20, 30, 5, 9. There's a list. How can you find the minimum from this list? Given that you don't, like there is no mean function. Or maybe the interface asks you, do not use the mean function.
Could you use a for loop for everything in there and see if it's smaller than the previous number?
Well, definitely you use a for loop to iterate then.
And you take each
What's the
number,
starting point?
we make a value variable that stores the current lowest number.
Okay.
And
What's the lowest, like when we start the iteration at the very beginning, what's the lowest number? 0. Well, there's a -9. That's the exception, right? Those are the test cases. Whenever you're working with some code, you can think of, well, this can be 0. Well, can be negative number.
When we sort the list first and then ask for the.
Sort.
Yeah.
Then
And then when we're referencing our for loop, we're actually asking for the first element.
so when you sort it, you have the first number lowest, right? Or the last number lowest. You can see like, well, L1 0 is the lowest number. Well, sort is also a built-in function, right? But as an interviewer, I am asking you, do not use any built-in function. Then what? Your strategy is correct, but you need to know what is the initial lowest number.
Just depend on what the case is for? Or is there a different way to make it so that it'll all
So for example, in this list, what's the lowest number?
-9?
-9? No, like at the very beginning, when you're iterating the loop, what's the lowest number in that variable?
For this specific list, it'd be negative, or it'd be, you'd set it to like 100 or something.
But you never know what is the number inside the list.
Exactly, so I'm not 100% sure how to.
Anyone?
You can just take the first text and compare it to the rest.
That can be a solution. Yes.
Could you add the whole list together, get a for loop to add them all together? And for sure, that's going to be, that's a roundabout solution.
So you're going to add those numbers and then
And I guess that would be larger than any of them, unless they're like,
for the larger number, right? But for the negative number, like well, for the minimum number, it is tough somehow. So there are two options. One is what Cooper said, like you can use the first number as a negative number. So given that there is only one number, 10, 10 is the negative number, like the 10 is the minimum number of this list. 10 is the maximum number of this list, right? You can choose the very first number as the negative lowest or highest. Or there are two options like positive infinity and negative infinity. Okay, so in Python, we can write an infinity like this way, float minus INF. It is the negative infinity number. For the positive, it's like just INF. So you can just put a lowest equal float negative infinity. That means this is the very lowest number. We cannot write negative infinity here, but we can write negative 100. We cannot write negative 100 here, right? That's why we cannot use this one. Either we could use negative infinity, or we could take the very first one is the lowest number, and then iterate to check whether the next value is greater than or less than. Like here in this case, whether it's a less than. If it is, then we can update it. Otherwise, we don't need to. So negative infinity, first 10, well, you need to update it. At this point, 10 is the lowest. The next 20, no. 30, no. 5, yes. You need to update it, 5. Then negative 9, yes, you need to update it. Then negative 100, yes, you need to update it. So negative 100 is the lowest number. Same thing for the max. We can take the first value as the max, go to the next. 20 is greater than 10, yes. 30 is greater than 20, yes. 5 is greater than 30, no. Negative 9 is greater than 30, no. Negative 100 is greater than 30, no. That means 30 is the highest number. This is how you can find the minimum and maximum from a given list. Given that you are not, like you're not allowed to use any built-in function. But yeah, sort is one of the way. But it takes longer time. So, well, when you go to the higher level class, sort will take log of n time, but searching an item is like log of just n time, not the log. So for example, there are like 100 element, it will take 100 log to 100 time to do this operation. But in case of regular searching, it will take 100. If it takes like 1 millisecond to access one item, it will be like 100 milliseconds for 100 item. And for the sorting, it will take 100 multiply log 2 of 100 milliseconds. Okay. What is the log of 100? Well, it's not a math class again. Log 2 of 100 is like 2 power of maybe 8. So log 2 gone, then 8. It will take 100 multiply at least 8 times. That means more than 8 times of the previous solution. At least for the 100 element. If it's like 1 million, well, it can be a different number. Okay. Any question? Well, we'll be using our CSV file to find the mean, max, and average. But before going to that, we need to convert those things into two-dimensional list, right? So what we have done before, we can convert the whole thing in a 2D list. In a 2D list here. Then when we have the 2D list like this, and I know the third item is the score. So what I can do from this two-dimensional list, I can extract the numbers. So I'm not going to use the two-dimensional list here. What I need to do from the row, I need to find the score. And what's the score? Row of, for each row, it is the third item, right? The second index. And make sure you need to convert it to an integer or float. Now this is like an individual score. Now if you create a list here like scores and append this information to the scores, scores dot append to the current score. At the end of this loop, we don't need to create a two-dimensional list here. We're just accessing it and then extract the score only. So we're creating only the score list. When we have the scores, we can easily operate those mean, max, average, and median function. Make sense? Now it can be easier if we can use a CSV module. So given that previously we don't have any CSV module, but now we can use a CSV module. It's like a Python library. So CSV module has some function like reader and writer. We can easily read and write to the file. So for the reader, it will give you the whole content. And basically it gives you a list. You don't need to convert everything to the list manually. It will give you the list. And then from the reader, for each row is like a single list. From the two-dimensional list, you are accessing one single list. So here, what I can do here, there's some function called like next, like a skip, like not a skip, seek. For the seek, it is like starting from 0. Then if you're doing seek 100, you start from 100. So here, the reader is like reading everything. When you use the next reader, it skip the header, the first row. Then it goes to the next row. That means in the reader right now, is the first, second row, then third row, fourth row, so on and so forth. This is some powerful function in CSV file. You can skip the header. When you're working with data interpolation or data processing, probably those data are stored in a CSV file. It's better to use the CSV module there. Okay. Same thing for the CSV writer. For the CSV writer, there is a function called like write row, and it also accepts the same way that what we have done for the write lines. But we're giving as a list, it will create a string with comma separated. It is not converting, like it is not storing the whole list there. It is just converting a list to string and then put the string to there. Sense? Writing multiple rows, well, there is a function called like write rows instead of write row. If you're putting list within a list, then it will be write rows. If it's just a single list, then write row. Write row will convert a two-dimensional list to one-dimensional list, and internally it will call the write row for each list. And at the end, it will add a new line. This is how it works. Okay. There are some examples here. For example, like I'm giving you a text and I ask you to find the words from the text. How could you find a word from a text? If I'm giving you a text, what is the way to find out the words? Well, for example, like this text, this line. Well, line is the second thing. Text is like full thing. So this is like a text. I'm giving you the whole text and ask you how many words are there? What's the strategy?
Could we use split and then do the dot?
No, like a naive way, like not a programming way. Count. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 this way.
Oh, I see.
So what's the strategy then? So words are separated by space, right? So this is the first strategy. So we're counting whenever there's a space, we're counting the next one, right? And then if there's some punctuation, we're not counting it. A comma, colon, a dash, a full stop, we're not counting those things. So the first thing is like, as a programmer, or whenever you're writing a code, then you need to teach the Python program that how they can extract that text to the word. Well, what's the first strategy? I have a whole text, and I know the text contains multiple sentences. And how I can define a sentence? Well, when there is a full stop, right? That means I can extract sentences by splitting the whole text by dot separator, right? With the dot separator, I have that many sentences. And most of the sentences are same structure. For each sentence, there's some words that's separated by spaces. Now, sometimes someone can miss this space, just write comma, then we. It means like there are two words, we need to remove those punctuation. How we can remove the punctuations? There are various ways. One simplest way is like, if there's some punctuation, replace by space. Then I have space, a lot of spaces, right? I can easily fly. Fly with words. If there's some spaces, in between the space, there's a word. Then I can split the sentence, each sentence has the same pattern. That means I can use the same thing in a loop. I don't need to do it again and again. Just the first time I need to convert the sentences by dot separator. Then for each sentence, I need to convert those sentences by word with space separator. But make sure for each sentence, you need to sanitize that sentence. What does it mean by the sanitize? Well, there's some punctuation. You need to replace those punctuations by spaces. If there's some colon, and how do you define a punctuation? It can be anything, right? Comma, colon, then maybe question mark, exclamation mark. A lot of emojis right now. How do you define its punctuation?
Alphabetical. Okay.
Non-alphabetical, yes. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
So non-alphabetical, when it's a non-alphabetical, then replaced by space, right? And then you have a sentence, and then you can split it by words. This is how it works. So line dot replace whenever there is a dash, then replace by space, and it can be different one. If it is other than any non-alphabetical character, replaced by space, and then split by space, and it will, so by default it's like a space, so you don't need to put it explicitly space, so it will create a list of line. For each line you can convert the words, right? I don't know what is doing to enter the words of the dash appears after the word. What is the purpose of this punctuation? Probably it is asking how many punctuations are there. Make a list of punctuation marks. We can join. Well, this is another thing. So how we can find there are some punctuations, like how many punctuations are there? Well, again, is alphanumeric or is alphabetic? So yes, you need to use the is alphanumeric. It's because 1 to 3 are not a punctuation. It is alpha may not work. So half of your chocolate. So it is alphanumeric. It's because dot or any punctuation is a part of is not alphanumeric. In that way, you can just search that many items and count it. Okay, now before going to the checking equivalent file, I would like to know sometimes we need to find the unique words. You know what is meant by the unique word? Or unique things. Like if there are like multiple items, you'll print single items. If there are like 100 twos, then just print only 1 2. If there are like 100 open, just print only 1 open. Those are the unique words. There's no duplication. Now, let me add some code here. So here's what I am going to do here. Using an open function, maybe with open. With open, my file name can be anything. TXT. I'm going to open it as a read mode as the file object. Then there's a function. Okay. Maybe this function. Data. I'm just writing a function called like generate word list from the data. So there's a function. I'm not writing anything. Given that this will generate a list of words. So here's my words. My second part is like, I'm not worrying about this part is because this part is done by the previous examples. Now I need to find the unique words from this word list. So for example, the word list is like word. Maybe I need to copy the word multiple times. Then another can be print, then open. So these are the words. Okay. So the words is like this. What I need to do, I need to find the unique words from this list. How can I do that?
Might be a little unwieldy, but you could go through each item compared to each other item and see if they're the same. And if they are, delete one.
Yeah, that can be a way.
Again, probably unwieldy.
Yeah, like if it is like 1000 words, maybe 1 million words, it will take a long time. Yeah, this is the very basic way. But what you can do here, we can use this way. We can use, if the word is empty, we're not going to do anything. Then we're going to do like found index as a -1, is because if we can find anything, it should be at least 0. -1 means like there's nothing there. Just like our negative infinity, we're just writing -1. Then we're looking for that, we're iterating the whole list by its length. So I means like index. So word list is a whole list. I'm looking for that particular one. So first, it's the same way actually for each line. So we're actually reading line by line, not getting the whole list. We're reading each line. From this line, we're splitting each word. For each word, we're looking for a word list which I haven't created yet. That means I'm just reading one single line at a time, then convert that line to words. And initially I have an empty word list. Then I'm looking for those words in the word list if it is there. If it is not there, add it to that word list. On the next line, I'll be looking for the same thing again and again. But yeah, at the very end, it will be the same thing for your solution. If it is like 1,000 words and our line is like 500 words, the very last line may be a 500 line words. That means I have to check 500 words to that 1,000 words. But typically, a line cannot be that long. But if it is like a whole list, 1,000 list, it will take the same iteration, 1,000 to the power 1,000, not just multiply. It's the power of 1,000. N power of n. In that case, we have an empty word list. For each line, I'm converting to the words. For each word, I'm checking to the word list if it is there. If it is there, we found it and skip it. Going to the next one. Break means like we're breaking this word, going to the next word. That means the word is already there. If it is not, that means we need to check it again that, well, make sure we didn't find it. So we didn't find it. If we didn't find it, we can add it to there. And then we increment the index found index 1. On the next run, I have the found index, but if it is already there, we're skipping the whole thing. Just breaking the word and going to the next iteration, so on and so forth. Does that make sense? So this is like a non-traditional way. Typically, we'll be using a dictionary, but since we haven't covered dictionary yet, in the next 2 weeks, we'll be covering dictionary. It will be so much easier for dictionary. But I just put here like with or without dictionary, but with using dictionary, we'll be covering these things again when you cover the dictionary. So this is for the, no, this is not for the unique word. This is for the word frequency. We're just actually finding the frequency of each word. If the word is there, we're looking for the frequency of that particular word. But for the unique word, it will be the similar way. It will be the similar way. Without dictionary, we have a list. We're just checking if the word is in the list. If it is not there, we don't need to find the index here. We're looking for index to know how many items are there. But if it is like a unique word, then we're just checking if the word is not there, only then we can append it to the previous list. Otherwise, we don't need to. Okay. But yeah, I want you to read those examples very, very carefully so that you have some understanding what they're doing here. Only check the without dictionary part, not the with dictionary one. This is very easier, but I'll be covering those things later. We'll check how you can solve it without a dictionary. As I told you, as an interviewer, they can ask you like, can you solve it without a dictionary? I know it is easier to solve it in a dictionary. I saw some of my friends like got interview from Google, and the problem is like very, very simple. But they ask you, can you solve this problem in that way, that particular way? They're giving you the way to solve the problem, not your way. So you need to know different ways to solve the problem. That's the important things. Okay, now the last thing here is the checking the file equivalency, whether the both file are equal. How do you know both are equal? If I can give you two files, how do you know though both are equal? By the content, right? If the content is same, you can say they are equal. So let's see how they've checked. Data 1, data 2 are equal, then they're equal actually. The other way is the hash function. Have you heard the hash function before? Hash function is sort of encryption, like what you have done for the cipher. Hash function is like an encryption technique, but it's like a one way. You cannot decrypt from the hash, just like our password. When we write the password in any web page, they are converting this password to a hash value. And since it's like a one way, when you ask to reset your password or you ask the website, what was my last password? They cannot tell you. They ask you to reset the password. So this is like a one way. So even if it is like a plain text on the database, no one knows what it is actually. So hash value, for example, like there's the hash library, and very common hashing is like MD5. So if you're just writing MD5 to anything like Python, I can use a hash. So this is the hash for Python. Even if it is like a smaller p, it will be different one. It means exactly it matched with some value, some numeric value. Whenever you're writing some password, like your favorite password, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Best one.
The best one, right? But I try to like I tried the same 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like this way. This is the same 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, 6. So even if your favorite password is like this, then it will create a hash value like this way. It means if I'm the web admin, I can see everything in my database. I can only see these values, but I cannot extract your original password from this value. Now, for the file, if the file hashing are same for both cases, then we can say like both files are equal. Now, when you take the networking class, you see if it's like 1 gig of data, but you cannot transfer the 1 gig of file from source, like from Google to your drive. What they're doing, they're just sending those data chunk by chunk, maybe 1 megabyte at a time, or 1 gigabyte, not 1 gigabyte, it's too much, maybe 20 megabyte at a time. That means it will take 5 times to send the data. Now at the very end, they're checking whether both files are equal, and there they're checking the hashing technique. When the hashings are same, that means in between Second and third transfer, no one changed the file information. No one intercept and no one just send a different file chunk so that they confirms the integrity of file transfer. But in our local system, when you're checking the file, both files are equal, we will use the hashing. But later on, you'll see when it's transferring from source to destination, we'll be using the hashing again there. Okay. But this is the high level things. I'm just telling you why the hashing is important. Any question? So the trivial way is to check file content. If both content are equal, or you need to copy, like see what's inside the file. Maybe the file contains 1 gig of data. One file, the another file is like another 1 gig of data. You need to extract the 1 gig of data to your RAM and then compare it, right? You don't need to. Just check the hash of that file content and hash of this file content. And hash will be like this value. Even if it is like 1,000 lines long, it will be like 32-bit hashing if you're using 32-bit hash technique. If it is like only one character, like 2, you'll see the same hashing length. So that's why people are using hashing. It's the same length every time. You need to copy a 1 gig of file with another 1 gig of file. It's just like a 32-bit numbers with 32-bit numbers. Okay. What else? Did I miss anything? Well, I've covered those things: punctuations, file equivalency, unique words, and word frequency. Typically, word frequency and unique words are very common example for a dictionary. But in this class, you need to know how you can find those things without a dictionary as well. Any question from file read write? Yes, give me a second. Yes.